Jeff came in and talked with a small group in Richmond, and he killed it, man. I'll let you give your background and everything, because you do it better than me, but I think you'll be entertained by this and probably come up with some good ideas too. Thanks a lot for coming, Jeff.
I'm the only thing standing between you and a 3:30 session on sales taxes. So, yeah, the bar's been set pretty low, fortunately. I'm enjoying my spot on the agenda. How many of you flew into Orlando from cold weather? So I especially want to thank you, because if my boss made a mistake and sent me to an 85-degree conference, I would be out of the pool right now. And I think they got a swim-up bar. I don't know if it's open in January or not, but anyway, I would just find a bar here and then take it out to the pool. My boss one time made a mistake of sending me to Interbike. Anybody ever been to Interbike in Las Vegas? And I found out like far too late that your badge actually like tracked your attendance. And I was like praying to God for like 5 days that they weren't going to send that back to the person that had paid for my registration. I think I checked in like 3 days into the conference. But I want to thank again, I'm excited to be here. I flew in from Richmond, which typically in mid-January would be cold. But yesterday it was about 70 degrees, which is great skiing weather in Virginia. So Winter and all the ski resorts really love this. But it almost feels like I'm back with my tribe, because I've been a runner my entire life. I wouldn't really refer to myself as a runner. If you would have seen me this morning, you would not, the first word that popped into your mind would not be runner. But ran my entire life. When I was in like the 6th grade, I signed up for a neighborhood 5K, and I won like the 12 and under age group. And right there, I determined that my future career was going to be as a professional runner, because I had captured the 12 and under age group on the Hopewell 5K. It had like 43 people in it. The whole race, I think my age group, there was like 2 of us. But I was going to be a professional runner. But I went on to run for James Madison University in the big city, and unfortunately they lost in the National Football Championship, which was actually held 2 days ago in Frisco, Texas, where it was snowing in Frisco, Texas. But they lost to North Dakota. I guess there's a football game tonight too, right? Another college football game. Yeah, small division. JMU in North Dakota, that was the big one. But I went on to run for JMU, and I was all excited. And we had Parents Weekend for our cross-country Parents Weekend at JMU, and we had a home dual meet. I think it was like 3 or 4 teams in it. And I was so excited for my parents. I was the first kid to go to college. Oh, well, I was the oldest kid too, but I was the first one to go to college. And my parents were coming up, and we were racing. I think we were racing like VMI and maybe George Mason. And my parents had been used to seeing me win races in high school, and I was so excited for them to make the trip to Harrisonburg. They were all proud of their oldest son. And at about the 2-mile mark, we were just putting in like way too many miles for me. I got passed by somebody, I think, that was being forced by VMI to run cross country. He was like a wrestler, like in the heavyweight division. And he passed me at the 2-mile mark, and that's why I determined that my future career was not going to be as a professional runner. And then fast forward, I found out that there were people like you that actually make your living putting on running races. And I was in a trip in Seattle. And tell me if I get too loud with this microphone. I also taught high school for 10 years. Just go like this, voice level 1. My wife used to do that, now my ex-wife, used to, maybe if I was too loud, she would give me the voice level 1 on. So if I get too loud, just give that. I'm gonna kick you up. But got into running, and I met John Lugville, the executive, who was still the executive director of the Sports Backers in Seattle. And I'd been teaching high school, and then I actually ran a not-for-profit for K through 12 teachers. And I met John in Seattle and was lucky enough to make my way into the endurance sports industry. Those of you that might know the Sports Backers in my hometown of Richmond, they own and operate, it's a sports commission, it's a not-for-profit sports commission, whose goal is to position Richmond as one of the most physically active communities in the country. And so thanks to John and his leadership and the staff there, they've done a tremendous job. The Monument Avenue 10K at one point was over 40,000 people in Little Old Richmond. I think right now it's about 25,000. They also own and operate the Richmond Marathon and some other big events. So for 11 years, I was one of the lucky people that got all day, much like many of you, if not all of you. What I got to do for a living was talk about the very first thing that I chose to do in the morning. Although some mornings I wake up and I don't choose, I feel like I have to run because that's been a lifelong passion. But I kind of fell into the job of going out and promoting and selling these events. And now 4 or 5 years into my tenure with the PGA Tour, which I do not golf. But I found it, I never even envisioned having a career going out and selling. As a matter of fact, even now, I hate to even use that word. But all I had to do was go out and literally convince people that running was as great as a passion and as an interest as I thought it had been since I was a little kid. And so I found the job of going out and promoting and bringing corporate partners on that much easier. I have friends that they work for like office technology companies. Not that we all need printers, but I mean, are you really that excited about selling me this copier? That's obviously not the first thing that you want to do in the morning is get up and talk about how much you love copiers or office technology. You know, I mean, nobody jumps up in the morning and is like, man, I can't wait to scan my first, or actually I do say that. I can't wait to scan my first contract. But, you know, rarely do you get up in the morning and you just can't wait to hit that printer for the first time. And I got to go out and literally just run with my friends in the morning, then I got to talk about it for 9 or 10 hours a day. I don't actually golf. If anybody would have told me that I would have spent every one of my weekends during the year, starting this weekend, because our season on the Champions Tour used to be known as the Senior Tour, but Champions is much more PC. For those of us that are now over the age of 50, and I would be eligible for the Champions Tour, except I do not have one very important prerequisite, and that's I don't golf. So for 5 years, I've been doing that as well. And when I think back on the 15 years that I've been doing sponsorship, again, at the 45 very brief time that we have here, so obviously you're not going to walk out of this room being able to double your revenue or triple your revenue after just talking about building corporate partnerships for 45 minutes. But when I think back on what has allowed me some success in the 10 or 11 years that I was in the endurance sports industry, and then some success that I've had with the PGA Tour, primarily with an event that we have in Richmond. We now operate one of the 3 playoff events at the end of the Champions Tour for the Charles Schwab Cup. So in Richmond, we host the top 72 players. John Daly, Freddie Couples, Ernie Els just turned 50, so Ernie Els from South Africa is making his debut on the Champions Tour in 4 days in Hawaii. Unfortunately, I did not get that gig. But we actually host them, and now the 27 tournaments, and I was talking to the gang from Madison, Wisconsin. Madison actually hosts one of our peer tournaments, the American Family Insurance Championships. Along with the event in Richmond, the event hosted by Steve Stricker and his wife in Madison is one of the biggest events on the Champions Tour as well. But when I think back to those 15 years, to the extent that I've had any success in bringing corporate partners on to the Richmond Marathon and Monument Avenue 10K, or now with the PGA Tour, I think I can really kind of boil it down to 4 or 5 things that have allowed me to have some success during those 15 years. I was going to put this at the very end. These are very general, and please feel free at any time if you have a question. I want to keep this conversation, or just raise your hand. But these are just 5 kind of tips that I think if I look back and I have a 22-year-old or a 23-year-old call me and they say, Jeff, I'm in the sports leadership program at Virginia Commonwealth University, and I'm getting ready to graduate, and I want to have a job in sports sponsorship or corporate sales. Will you be willing to have coffee with me for an hour? If I'm just sitting down with them for 30 minutes and really exploring their interests, this is a lot of what I talk about, or a lot of what I talk about with some of the younger guys that are coming out of our inside sales office at the PGA Tour. The first one really just speaks about networking. My peers in the Richmond office give me a hard time because if I'm on the way to a coffee meeting, I will oftentimes, if not always, stop at a Starbucks, even if I'm within 3 or 4 blocks of where the coffee meeting is taking place. So if I'm on the way to the Country Club of Virginia, which is our host course for the tournament in Richmond, there's a Starbucks about a half a mile away from the Country Club. And I almost always will stop at that Starbucks to grab coffee on the way to the meeting. I'll stop at 1 or 2 Starbucks on the way home from the meeting. And I do that because where do all the business professionals go on their way to their law office or their bank in the morning? In Richmond, a lot of them will go to one of the 85 Starbucks in the Richmond region. So almost, I expense all of it, but most of it.
Is that why
you're so wired?
But I do it because I think to be successful in what we do, and I know a lot of you, how many of you work, and I would expect very few hands to go up there, how many of you have sponsorship as your only responsibility? Right? So none of you. When I was at the Sports Backers, it was one of my chief responsibilities. Also, we were a 501c3, so I was also oversaw our development as a not-for-profit. So it was fundraising, a little bit different than sponsorship. But I tell everybody is that you have to get known in the community. In Richmond's a city of about 250,000 people, state capital. The region is about 1 million. You need to get to the point where there is only 2 degrees of separation between you and any corporate decision maker in town. I grew up in a small town outside of Hopewell, and then came to Richmond about 20 years ago in 2000. I immediately got involved in our local Chamber of Commerce, eventually got elected to the board of the Chamber of Commerce in Richmond. I was chair of the Richmond Business Council of the Chamber. I'm the incoming chair of the YMCA Board of Directors. And that's just, it doesn't really matter, but one of the reasons that I get so involved in the community is I want to know. I love being with people and learning about what they do in the community, but I find it's my responsibility to get to know everybody in town. Quick story. A handful of years ago, Richmond was going to lose its AAA baseball team, the Richmond Braves. They were leaving Richmond after many years of arguing about a stadium and moving back to Atlanta because the Richmond Braves is one of the only minor league baseball teams that's owned by its parent franchise, the Atlanta Braves. And in place of that, we were going to get a AA team, and everybody thought that was the death of baseball in Richmond. The fact that we were going from a AAA team to a AA team, which is our team now is what, the Flying Squirrels. And there are no Flying Squirrels in Richmond. But it was or there might be a few, I don't know. I'm an expert on squirrels. But it was a great marketing ploy. The GM of the Flying Squirrels in Richmond is a guy that, along with Madonna and Prince and a handful of others, he gets away with he goes by Parnell. Nobody even knows that his name is Todd Parnell. I know it because I'm good friends with him, but his name is Parnell. He was just honored as the minor league executive of the year. The Atlanta Braves, the Richmond Braves, the AAA team, probably averaged about 3,000 or 4,000 people a game. The Flying Squirrels, our AA team, averages about 7,000 or 8,000 and wins the attendance race in minor league baseball in the Eastern League every single year. And the number one reason they do that is because there is not one business professional in town. And again, Richmond's state capital, it's a big business, a fairly decent sized business. There's not one person in town that does not know Parney by name. And I mean, everybody knows him. Nobody calls him Todd. Everybody calls him Parney, his nickname. He has a pub in his office called Parney's Pub that everybody goes to after the games. And he'll tell you that, look, it's the Giants' responsibility. They're an affiliate of the Giants, not worried about baseball. My job is to put a circus on every single day. But he made it his point. He's new to Richmond to get to know everybody. And they have dominated what a AAA team ever did because he got to know everybody in town. So that's very important. Relationship building, I think, is kind of that second point. I think is paramount. That you have to get to know everybody, whether it's your local hospital, which obviously aligns well with your event. We did a lot of work with, some of you are giggling, maybe not. Maybe they should, and maybe not yet, but Anthem, health insurance companies, we did a bunch of work with when I was at the Sports Backers, car companies that were providing us with pace cars, Fleet Feet, and all the local running shops we partnered with on a variety of levels. And I wanted to get to know them on a personal level and really create friendships. There were people that worked with me when I was at the Sports Backers that really I do not work with anymore because it's not a good match with what we do at the PJ's Tour, but they are still very, very good friends of mine because what I formed with them was a friendship more than a business partnership when I was with the Sports Backers. Now, do I ask them to sponsor the golf tournament? Yeah. But I get no, and I just keep going back to them every single year. And knowing that they're going to tell me no. But I do that because my friends. And I can say of all the things I've learned in creating partnerships over the past 15 or 20 years, even before when I was running the K-12 nonprofit, it is all about networking and relationship building. The third bullet point I put on there, there's not a business in your town that has to sponsor a 5K. Nobody opens a business, not even your running store, certainly not a hospital, that says, we're going to open this business because we want to sponsor a 5K. Why do they sponsor a 5K or a 10K or a cycling event in your town? What's that?
Advertising.
So, yeah, to build a brand. What else?
Because they like it themselves. They have somebody.
Yeah, that's a good answer. Probably not one that I would typically put up, but they have a passion for what they do. A lot of people sponsor the 10K races because, as a matter of fact, I'm mad at my former colleagues right now because Allianz, the travel insurance company, they were a sponsor of our golf tournament, and she just told me that, now we're not going to mess with the PGA Tour anymore. We're going to sponsor this 8K of the sports backers. So I immediately made my former colleagues take me out to lunch because they put money in my pocket. But the reason Mike Nelson, the CEO of Allianz, not only does the sports backers actually uses their event cancellation insurance, so you could buy, if you sign up for the Richmond Marathon and you get injured or you get deployed or there's a funeral of an immediate family member, you can get your registration back. But Mike is a passionate runner. And so my response to them was a mixed sense to me. You know, I know Mike's a passionate runner. Because of that, I know that health and wellness is a big part of that. But you're there to help them solve a problem. The reason that we do well in Richmond, and maybe the reason that Steve Stricker and those guys do well in Madison, Wisconsin, is because what we sell is playing entertainment in Richmond. And there's not a lot of opportunities in Richmond because we're not a major league sports market to entertain your clients. You can go to the Flying Squirrels game, the windows and the suites are so scratched up, you might see the baseball game. Maybe you won't see the baseball game. But, and I love partying. But, you know, we've got university basketball, BC basketball is pretty good, made a run to the Final Four. But we sell playing entertainment, and in Richmond, that's the problem that we're solving. A lot of people aren't coming out to the golf tournament because, hey, Jeff, I'm going to give you $10,000 just because I like golf. They're spending their corporate money because we're one of the only events in town that will help them entertain their clients. I think to devote yourself to kindness, I tell everybody that in this business, how many of you have heard no before? I tell everybody, I'm like, no is a perfectly acceptable answer. And I sometimes tell myself, I'm like, I'm probably nicer or as nice to the people that tell me no as I am to the people that tell me yes, which doesn't make a lot of sense. But I never, ever, ever pretend to know their business better than they do. Does anybody have a CarMax in their respective locality? A few of you do. CarMax is, we're lucky enough in Richmond. CarMax calls Richmond its corporate home. CarMax would do a ton with the sports backers. In Richmond, we have a holiday themed, is it a 5K now? The Tacky Light one?
Yeah.
So it's a 5K. Probably the most miserable day of my entire life was the very first Tacky Light run. Because it poured for 8 hours. All of you are used to that, right? Working in inclement weather. And it wasn't like an 85-degree rain like you would have. It was like a 33-degree rain. Like this close to being snow for 8 hours. And somehow we still had 5,000 people that signed up, still 2,000 people showed up. But that's an aside. CarMax did a ton with the sports backers, and I know them well because I've worked with them for so long. And I have met with Leslie, the decision maker at CarMax, in 2016, 2017, 2018, and 2019, and I've gotten 4 no's. And within the next month, I will get a 5th no. Because she just tells me, Jeff, as well as I know her, it's just not a good fit. You know, the country club's not really associated with our brand. We're a used car dealership. We do the Tacky Light Run and the Monument Avenue 10K because they're big community events aligned around employee health and wellness. But it's almost like I love to still go talk to her. I don't know why. Because I know that it's not going to result in a partnership with us. But I love getting her honest feedback. And she doesn't find my meetings to be threatening because she knows that I know that I'm going to get a no at the end of the meeting. One day I might get lucky. But I always think that you have to be respectful of them. Try to find the right fit between what you offer as a race asset and what they're looking for. But it doesn't work. Make sure to honor that. That last one, then we'll move on. Work to get to your why as opposed to your what. The 10K, you know, I would never go out and say, look, we've got this 10K that we want you to sponsor, or we've got this big outdoor lifestyle, or we've got a golf tournament. It was more important for me to build that emotional connection to the person that was sitting across the table by telling them why were we offering a 10K in the first place? Or why were we doing this big outdoor lifestyle festival that we call Dominion Energy River Rock? But it was all about why. The reason I would tell people that we were doing the 10K is because we were trying to make Richmond the most physically active region of the country. And we wanted people to get off every year at the 10K finish. How many of you have cried at the finish line before? A few of you. Every year at the 10K, I worked for the 10K for 11 years. I ran it. I was lucky enough to run it as a participant for the 3 years before I started my job with the sports backers in 2004, 2005. And every year I would cry of something that happened to the sports backers. Not the elites. I wasn't crying when a runner from East Africa crossed the finish line in 28 minutes or 29 minutes. I wanted to cry because it reminded me of how slow I was. But what really made me get emotional was those people that had just gotten off the couch as a part of our 10K training team, or cancer patients that had been wheeled for the first 6.1 miles and climbed out of the chair. That's what I was promoting to our partner. With the PGA, you're like, Jeff, how do you convince, what's the why of your PGA Tour? The difference with our golf event is at the end of the day of any PGA Tour event, we donate, once we write our final check, because we're a 501c6, every penny stays in our host communities. So in Richmond, we're getting ready to announce a donation of well over $1 million back to the community. And that's the why of the PGA Tour, which is extremely important to us. I just want to focus, again, there's no way I know some people in the room want to know, Jeff, who do I call? Do I call them? Do I TikTok them? I don't even know if you can TikTok anybody. Do I YouTube them? Do I use LinkedIn Messenger? Is it okay to make a cold call, or should it only be a warm prospect? One of the guys that trains us for the PGA Tour told me to never go into a meeting without a written agenda. I'm like, you gotta be crazy. I'm not taking a written agenda. Now some of you might. It's not my style to take a written agenda into a first meeting. How do you value what you're selling? What's the presenting sponsorship? What's the finish line festival worth? All of those questions, and obviously we're not gonna get through those in 45 minutes, so I just wanted to key on a few things. And that is, when you're meeting with somebody, what makes your event different? What makes your 5K different, your 10K different? What makes your cycling event or your charity walk? Because when you go to a bank or a law firm, I can guarantee you're not the only one knocking on the door. Even that day, somebody else is going to ask them for money. And there were events with the sports backers that I could not differentiate. And these guys probably, and I'm not employed by them, so I'll go ahead and bash a few of their events. We had a half marathon that in August. Virginia in August is like 139 degrees with 99% humidity. And so it feels like 170 degrees in Virginia. And we have a half marathon through the town of Ashland, which they claim to be the center of the universe, in Ashland. And there's very few spectators. There's like 3 or 4 cows at milepost 8. And it was very hard for me to develop sponsorship around that race because it was a late summer race. Nobody was in town. And to this day, there was nothing I could do, in all honesty, to distinguish that event from any other event in town, to include our own. Now, if you look down here at the bottom, that is, I think it's Sasha DeGillian, who at the time was like the world rock climbing champion. I love that picture. That building in the background is the Federal Reserve Bank of Richmond. That event, Richmond, has anybody been to Richmond? It was just named one of the top 50 places in the world to visit this year by New York Times. Seriously. Look at all the shock space. What? Only 5 American places. That's a true story. But one of the great things about Richmond is it is a true urban environment. You can do a half marathon downtown and never take a step on the pavement. We have Class 3 whitewater. And so we put together this outdoor lifestyle festival, and I spent 10 years going to the outdoor retail show, which used to be in Salt Lake City, now in Denver. And I would go and I'm like, look at these. I would go into Thule and Yeti and Subaru, and I'm like, look at these pictures. We're doing a genuine outdoor festival in the middle of a city. And that was the only event, probably in my team with the sports backers, that we were able to bring almost every top national sponsor in its category, from Subaru and the automobiles to Thule roof racks to Yeti to Yukonuba, all of those, because that event was so unique. And now that event gets about 100,000 people to downtown Richmond every 3 days, big concerts. So you need to ask yourself, What are you doing to make your event different? Here's some possible ones. I love that picture up top. Is the emotional connection. That girl's name is Morgan Sears. I stole that off her Facebook page. She qualified for the Boston Marathon and the Richmond Marathon. She did a BQ this past November. And she said, but I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but barely. She said, this was the best day of my entire life. Her fiance took that picture. So yeah, forget the engagement and the diamond ring, right? Or the fact that we're building a new house. This is the best day of my life. The fact that I qualified for Boston. And how many of you on our social media pages, we can ask somebody, because does anybody have training programs leading up to their races? I'm a big fan of training teams, because you can also incorporate your sponsors. You can give your sponsor 6 months of exposure as opposed to 48 hours. And that emotional, and it allowed us to communicate with those 1,000 people that were training for the Richmond Marathon. And we were like, on a Saturday morning, what'd you have for breakfast? You get like 800 responses, like cereal, oatmeal, bacon and eggs. If I asked that for the PGA Tour and sent that out to our attendees 6 months before the tournament, you know, who do you want to win? Or what'd you have for breakfast? Or what course they played? It would be crickets, right? Nobody's paying attention, and there's nothing wrong with it. We have a great event. But the emotional connection that you can establish between a running event or a cycling event or any participatory event and the brands, I could get on and on. We would actually post surveys and we would ask them, who sponsored your event? One year we actually messed up and we were like, who's the title sponsor of the Anthem Richmond Marathon? And 100% of the people knew it was Anthem. That was our mistake. But that emotional connection, I think that you can do is one. Obviously, health and wellness, whether it's because that's their internal culture. You know, I would argue with a running event or a cycling event, you've got to find something else that's just that. But the health and wellness, obviously, health systems, health insurance companies, CEOs that promote a health and wellness culture, all of those are good targets. The size and scale event. I mean, obviously, for me, it was a lot easier to sell a 30,000 person 10K than a 1,000 person half marathon. And you can start to attract brands, obviously, as the event gets bigger. Or how many of you have multiple events that you manage? How many of you approach partners where they can get involved in all those events? So obviously that you can build scale by getting them involved throughout the year as well. So the size and scale of the event is one. I'll tell you really quickly. The 3 playoff events on the Champions Tour are Richmond, Los Angeles, and Phoenix. Our event in Richmond is bigger than the other 2 events combined, LA and Phoenix. Anybody want to venture a guess as to why that is?
The only place that has teams.
Do what?
Richmond's your event.
Sounds good. Yeah, 2 years ago they left Richmond and we killed it. I mean, we had big crowds and everything else. They went to LA. The Dodgers were in Game 5 of the World Series. The Rams were 8-0 at home. LAFC and LA Galaxy were both on the soccer pitch. Either the Lakers or the Clippers were playing basketball. I mean, you want client entertainment. So that is a great example why we were able to, we're kind of dominating the market when it comes to client entertainment dollars. In Richmond alone, we've got 150 corporate partners for this one event. That's just one venue that we have on one hole. It takes us 2 or 3 months to build it. Some of our golf tournaments now take them 8 months just to build, and they tear it down for 4 months and then just start all over again for the big client entertainment spends. This is, and I hope nobody, I don't know, I just picked that race out of blue, and we're all guilty of this. I'm guilty. I've got one of these with the PGA Tour. Is how many of you, when you want a sponsor, would just send a deck out or a one-sheeter like you see on the left there? Anybody? Some of you will?
Yes.
So, I mean, and we got this with the PGA Tour, so I'm not picking on anything, but it's got a presenting sponsor, $2,500, platinum level at $1,500. And this has worked for me, again, all of you can share something. We all have methods of communication that we prefer the most. I'm best over coffee or beers. I'm probably worst at phone calls. I don't like, talking to, trying to generate a lead on the phone. I have some partners that like text messaging or whatever else. But our goal with the PGA Tour, we're expected to have 10 face-to-face meetings per week, which is a lot. But obviously, we've got people that's their sole responsibility. But our superiors up in Florida, when I took the job, This one guy, he now controls all the revenue for the Detroit Tigers and the Red Wings. He's a great guy, his reputation preceded. And I walked in and he goes, Jeff, if you do a good job, then I'm going to like you and you're going to like working here. If you don't do a good job, I'm not going to like you and you're not going to like working here. So the expectation was to kind of get 10 meetings. I go to the first meeting and I literally take nothing with me. Sometimes this is comical. I will actually take a notebook because it's a meeting and it makes me look official. I don't have a pen to write with. So I had to take something down. I would have, forgot my pen. Can I borrow your pen? And all I'm trying to do is have a conversation. I want to get to know them. Oftentimes in Richmond, and going back to my first page, is I already know them from the community. Rarely do I, if I have to make a cold call and try to find somebody to warm that lead up for me or get a meeting, but I will never ever take anything that looks like that into a first meeting. I won't take anything into a first meeting. And again, we have 150, so it's doable. I don't mean, we try to do, does anybody here do multiple year partnerships, 2 or 3 year? Those are always best, right? You can build escalators into them if you want, or just keep them flat. But I don't take anything. I just want to get to know them. I want to build a relationship, and I want to know what's most important to them. I mean, does your CEO run? Is that employee health and wellness? Is that important to you? So what's the culture? What are you looking for? Then I go back to them. The goal of the first meeting is just to get a second meeting. That's really the whole goal, is to try to get a second conversation. Even if they tell you no, remember what I said about kindness? Kindly ask for a second meeting. But just build a partnership. And a lot of time when I send them a deck after my first meeting, the second or third page of the deck will say, these were your objectives. Based on our conversation from that first meeting, as I understand it, these were your 2 or 3 objectives that I understood. You're a new bank in town, and you want to get your brand out there. You want to connect with our demographics are probably similar. I would imagine the running audience and the golf audience, just in terms of socioeconomics, are probably similar. And then I'd say, based on your objectives, this is what I would suggest. And with the PJ Tour, we're kind of taught at the end, I would give them a high spend, so I'd kind of shoot for the fences, and I still do that now. I'd give them a B option, which is typically where I think they're going to land, kind of in that middle. And to be honest, where I want them to end up is kind of in that middle, that B option. But I really don't want to give them an out, so a lot of times we'll give them 3 options, and that C option, or number 3, will include a lower investment, but we still get their foot in the door. And then I will ask them, we'll go through those 3 options, we'll go through the whole process. How's that sound to you? What do you think? How are we going to close the deal? How long, who's going to make the decision? But I think the key is you really want to have 2 or 3 meetings, and not just go in there and cold email or something that first proposal. I'll show this, and I'm going to take a few questions, quick questions. These are just 3 examples real quick. The one on the bottom left is Riverrock. We worked with a company called Roughware, and I met with Greg, the guy that I was a good friend with at Roughware, and we were going to name a wave of our mud run after Roughware. We had all these different events, like 15 events, rock climbing, kayaking. Kind of our approach was to give everybody presenting sponsorship of one event. And Greg says, Jeff, that's great. I didn't have anything. Probably had a notebook with no pen. And he goes, well, what we'd really like to do, because we're a dog company, we'd like to have a dog wave of the mud run. And now I'm not the operations guy, I'm just the sponsorship guy responsible. I'm like, sure. I'm in Salt Lake City, I'm a long way from Richmond, and nobody in our operations team. I'm like, and he told me, basically what they'd be willing to spend. I'm like, that's a done deal. And then I come back and I tell our operations team, and they're like, what? And so we're going to dog wave. What you want to be careful of is that you have a long gap between your last human wave and your dog wave, because if the dog is in the bathroom in the mud pit, it could be a mess. That never happened to the best of my knowledge. But it was phenomenal. That thing sells out every single year. It was purely based on a conversation between me and that partner. We would have never done that on our own. Markel sponsors our Pro-Am, a great event. The one on the right I'll finish up with. That's the Monument Avenue 10K. AT&T really wanted something, national brand, really wanted something out of the box. And we brainstormed with them. And eventually we came up with this idea based on our conversation after multiple meetings to come up with a dash for the cash. And with the 10K, at that time we had 40,000 runners. We would give, in average, average Joe from the field randomly selected a head start. Does anybody do that? It's a great idea. And so it's supposed to be, you know, you're going to give them a 2-mile head start. So when the gun goes off at 8:30, they're at the 2-mile mark. The Monument Avenue 10K, surprisingly it's on Monument Avenue, famous street in Richmond, and you go down 3 miles, literally you just do a U-turn around the median strip and you run back. So not only are you running from the fastest people, but you're also seeing them because they're going up as you're coming back. And we would have a GPS device in a golf cart with the now it's the Collegiate National Championship of the College Running Association. Back then, in 2008, we held the American Championship for 10K. And we quickly found out that a regular golf cart is not fast enough to keep up with these guys. So we got like a 911 call about 30 seconds into the race, and runners had already passed the GPS device. But that was a huge home run entirely based on our conversation with AT&T. If I had sent them like something on the left in the prior slide, it just wouldn't have worked. So it's very, very, very important that you understand. And most running events, you know, most of our events have 8, 9, 10 partners. So it was easy for us to kind of get together with them and understand what their needs and what their goals were. Questions? I know it's hard to do this in 45 minutes. Back.
How do you deal with relationships changing through like retirement or layoffs or other things?
So the question is, how do you, like, when you send out an email, they're like, that probably, as a matter of fact, I got one incoming this morning, like, Jeff, I'm not at the company anymore. And, you know, he was wanting to meet with me because now he's in media sales, because he's looking to sell me, so the tables have turned just a few hours ago. And I'm like, let's talk about, you know, who should I call first at your old employer? I think you just have to navigate it. If somebody retires and they leave that job or for some reason or another, you know, hopefully you have other relationships with that company that you just haven't been working with that one person. But if you have, I think you just got to figure out, you know, how do you go about building, or, you know, if they left on good terms, would they be willing to make a warm introduction? And we all know warm introductions are far better. We got a new guy in Richmond that had been in PGA Tour inside sales, and they will make 100 calls a day. I would last about 10 minutes in that job. And I told Mike, who's now very successful with us, but he came out of the inside sales environment of the PGA Tour, like, you know, this is Richmond. You've got to get out and just start meeting people and building relationships, because if you make 100 phone calls, most studies will show you if they're all cold, you might get 1 or 2 meetings, and you're just wasting your time. And you've got to get out. You're far better going to 10 Starbucks than you are making 100 phone calls. You're just starting to meet people, go to chamber meetings and things like that. Any other questions? Yeah.
I never understood what you said about how you sold AT&T on the Monument Avenue.
Yeah, so the question is like, what attracted AT&T was they wanted something really out of the box that would generate media attention. And so for them, just being a sponsor where we were going to put a core class sign in the finish line or put their logo on the back of the shirts, you know, we all know how big AT&T is and what they do with collegiate sports. It just wasn't going to move the dial for them. They wanted something that our state newspaper was going to write about, the Richmond Times-Dispatch, that was going to be talked about. And so we came up with this idea in tandem with them that we were going to give this man or woman a head start. And all along the course, typically the 4 miles, the 10K this person would run, AT&T would get all the spectator signs that said "Run Joe Run," and then be AT&T branded, and the finish line, you see that guy going through the finish line. You can see the elites. It's never as close as we thought it would be, but the elites are like a half mile back there or something. You can see a long way. It's supposed to come right down to the finish. But we knew that the media would be attracted to that, and it would give AT&T a lot of publicity, far more than it would if we just put typical sponsorship together.
How many of the sponsors that you sell for a road race do you also bundle in entries into the event?
Yeah, so Eric asked, as part of a partnership, how many entries would we sometimes, and I think we did that on a case-by-case basis if it came up. I mean, obviously entries were pretty cheap for us. You know, there's not a lot of fixed costs for that. So if Anthem, or especially like UPop's a title sponsor, you know, wanted 10 entries, 20 entries, and it was going to get them even more invested in the event for their employees participating, that was easy for us. So, and I probably rarely said no unless the number got out of hand. But if they're like, Jeff, you know, on the top of all of this, if we're investing 5 digits or 5 figures or whatever, can you help us out with 10 entries for our employees or get our CEO in? We would almost always do it. It's almost like with the PGA Tour now, because the price point is probably about the same. PGA Tour grounds pass in our tournament is $30 or $35, so similar, I guess, to most race entries, or somewhat in that neighborhood. And people say, Jeff, can I get 10 grounds tickets today? Our cost for a grounds ticket is like $0. So I'm like, sure, we'll do 30 grounds tickets in every 3 days or 40 over 4 days. If it's going to help, get a partnership across the finish line, that's easy stuff.
You mentioned that you never go into the first meeting with anything. What about how would you recommend, PGA is kind of well known.
Right. Yeah.
Some little race company like us is not well known.
Yeah.
Is it okay to walk in with, say, a fact sheet or something, a little bit of background about who we are?
Yeah, I think that's fine. I think the key, what I meant by that is the key is not to go in and try to sell them something on the first day and kind of slide that across and say, look, here's your menu, go ahead and pick one. And because then it gives them the appearance that you are there for you and not there for them. I mean, we're taught in training that we go through, like in emails, watch how many times you say the word I, it's all about them. And I'm guilty sometimes. Do any of you do post-event wrap-ups or fulfillment meetings or renewal meetings? Sometimes I realize that I'll go through an entire meeting and never even talk about the event that I'm there for because we become friends in a relationship. And literally it comes up like while I'm signing the check, or hopefully while they're signing the check. Because it's just a friendship and a give and take. But I would discourage you from actually trying to sell them in that first meeting. But if it's organizational information or just more about the 5K, and you want to leave them with a lead behind, I think that's perfect.
Okay.
So we get secret shop, our young guys will get secret shop sometimes by the PGA Tour. And sometimes if you talk about price on a phone call, you'll get a call the next day and get called into the principal's office because they don't want you talking about price like the first day, and then the next sales meeting will play you on loud for everybody to hear.
You mentioned briefly the socioeconomic status of the audience. So, how often do sponsors want to really dig into that detail? Or do they just always make decisions based on relationships?
Yeah, does anybody get asked that question? What's your demographic here? I mean, I think it's fair to say, correct me if I'm wrong, that most people in endurance events are pretty well educated, tend to have a higher degree of disposable income than the national average or your state average. Same thing with the PGA Tour. And if it's a high-end brand, I didn't talk about, does anybody here do a corporate run? Oh man, those things are the best. I'm a big fan of corporate runs. I think Eric's going to talk about it tomorrow. You're talking about something that's different. We came to Orlando. I've got a question after flying into Orlando. Like, how many Disney buses are there? Like last night. I am petrified of going back to the airport tonight. Richmond Airport, I get there like 10 minutes before my flight takes off. I'm going to leave like now for a 9 p.m. flight. What was your question? So for a corporate run, we actually had it wasn't like Lamborghini, but we had a real high-end car dealership. And so if you have luxury brands and they want to know, like, who am I reaching? Am I reaching, what is the target audience? You should know what a lot of times I'll go in and I'll ask them, who's your consumer? Like, I'm not scientific about it, but I want to know, like, if you were to tell me who your average purchaser is or average customer, who is it? Is it male, female? What's their age? Just paint me a picture, and I'll tell you if we're a good match. But a lot of people like the running audience, one, because you can build that emotional connection, like Morgan saying it's the best day of her life. And two, they travel for events. One day we were putting on a marathon on the other side, and we had all of our portable restrooms next to some really nice restaurant. It was a hotel, and with the Richmond Marathon, it fills up most of the hotels in downtown Richmond. And the restaurant manager called me. Now, first of all, if you have an operational problem, I'm the last person you want to call because I don't even know where the finish line is. But they said, like, look, we've got good patrons in here, and your portable restrooms are like bothering them. I'm like, first of all, your patrons, most of the people probably staying in here. I didn't say first of all, but most of your patrons are probably marathon runners. And then she's like, oh, that couldn't be. You're a marathon. Basically, they say your marathon runners couldn't afford our hotel. And we know marathoners travel and everything else. And so it's an attractive audience that brands want to get in front of. And so I think it's important that you, now I didn't get that a lot, but I think if you do get that question, it's important that you know who's coming to your race. One more question?
I think everybody's excited for sales tax.
What'd you have for breakfast?
I had a very hot run, or a very hot jog, and then coffee.
Starbucks.
Or whatever that is up there.
So, I have a small business. I'm basically running it, and
I've got one favor to ask before anybody leaves.
and very little sponsorship right now. So, unlike you, that's looking at like these large companies, like if I'm just looking at going to a dentist's office or a chiropractor or whatever, and am I only going to like the people that like my kids go to their dentist, or am I looking at like the dentist's office near the race star, right? And am I just literally walking in with a piece of maybe a flyer, just like as like a conversation piece? Like I know you say don't bring anything, but like
And I think it's fine.
maybe I should because I'm just talking to the receptionist.
I still think you need to figure out, like, it's important, like, is there anything that sets your race apart, and is it kids only, women's only, or, and then, I think personal relationships are fine. You mentioned your children's dentist or anything like that, but, and again, I don't know, what city or what town?
I live in Anchorage, Alaska.
I'm not very familiar with Anchorage,
It's
Alaska.
just,
There must be like a lot of 5Ks in Anchorage, I'm guessing, right?
No.
See, right there, that's your differentiator. Yeah, your big marathon. So, but I think you've got to figure out, and then are there business owners in town that are passionate runners that have participated in events, and you just start to narrow down the field.
So do I basically just look at who my clientele of people and just start thinking about what their profession is, and start like literally reaching out to those people directly?
Yep.
Or
And again, I think if you've got staff or ambassadors or participants that can help with an introduction, I always think that's better. Cold, like reach out with a cold email or a LinkedIn email or a phone call. First of all, I don't like making cold calls, so I know I'm not good at it. Starbucks.
I every day. A different one every day.
But those are all important things, but I think just to employ like a shotgun approach, I think is a difficult, when you probably have more important things to do operationally and marketing. But I've got a prospect list. I mean, between now and when I fly out, I need to make 2 or 3 appointments every single day. So that if I go to bed without making 2 appointments for 10 a week, then it's going to be hard for me to meet my goal. But
so this is kind of nitty gritty, but like, I mean, on our registration, we don't know what their profession is. So like, do you literally take one step further and like look on your Facebook, like where it says they're going, and just look at where they're working, and just like, so you have like the.
I think you can use that. I mean, I look at LinkedIn, and then I'll look at Facebook to see if there's pictures of them golfing or running or cycling. I mean, that's good information if I know they're a player. Then a lot of times I'll go to a meeting, I think there's going to be 1 or 2 people in the meeting, and there ends up being 8 people in the meeting. It's because they just want to get out of their regular job and talk about golf for an hour. And because they're passionate players. But I think if you can do that research and find out what their passions are, I do think that there are industries that more naturally align with what you're doing. Again, healthcare companies, doctors' offices, medical offices, gyms, running stores. We worked at one time or another with all 3 or 4 running stores in our market, Fleet Feet, Tom Summit, and all those guys as well. So, but I think my one answer would be you need to put a lot of effort and time into prospecting before reaching out and trying to figure out, who are some good targets.
Can I suggest something, Heather?
Yeah.
Look at your email addresses of all your participants.
Yeah.
That's your first place to look because A, they've done your race. B, they work for a company. It's not a Gmail or a Yahoo address. And see if you can drill down on that. What kind of company is it? Maybe where their position is.
And then I think it's all about just building that relationship and that friendship and trying to find, you can summarize it, trying to find something that they're passionate about with their business or personally, and then craft. Sometimes you've got to build something around your race. Like, sometimes like
Sometimes it's not them, it's a referral.
Right.
It's all about asking for referrals.
Well, you already got a foot in the door with the email address. So.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Last question.
I'm just going to ask the opposite to that. One of our events is the largest race in Michigan for a bike ride, and we have all Detroit local sponsors. sponsors, how do you recommend expanding beyond the local community for getting sponsorship, even at a state and national level?
Yeah, that's good. So our question was, how do you take it beyond the local and start to build those national? And my answer to that would be, as you start to expand and extend beyond your region, then it becomes even more important that that event really stand out. When I was with the running industry, sports backers, the only event that I could really do that with was the marathon, or maybe the 10K to some extent because it was big, we had 40,000 people, but was the Dominion Energy River Rock, because it was so unique. There was no other city in America in a genuine way hosting a festival that had the events that we were putting on, and was doing it not in a circuit, but in a genuine, where you could be in Class 3 whitewater, world-class single track, and that was so unique that we basically had no local sponsors. They were all national and international sponsors that were flying into Richmond that day and shipping huge crates for their expo booth. And for even us, that was different. But the reason that we were allowed to do that was it was so different. It wasn't just different in Richmond, it was different nationally. And I think that's really the only way that you can start to have some questions. Because if you're talking with Nikes and Adidas's and Brooks, or anybody, any AT&T, I mean, if it's a running event or a cycling event, even a big cycling event, they can do that. They can do that in all 50 states. And so it's got to be a relationship, or it's got to be something that's really compelling to them to get to your event. Again, tough in 45 minutes, but I hope you have one or two takeaways that you can walk away with.